Guten Morgen, comrades! Welcome to this video on the art book Born in Concrete, the EK series by Derek Stenning. Born in Concrete documents the end result of video game concept artist Derek Stenning's growing frustration with a kind of creative claustrophobia brought on by the restrictive nature of brief-led artistry. Towards the end of 2008, I was feeling creatively spent. The professional work I was producing was no longer creatively satisfying. I had made several attempts to start my own art projects, but years of working as a production artist had narrowed my view of art. It also happens that around this time, Stenning stumbled across an article on Nazi Germany's 1937 exhibition titled, and excuse my pronunciation, Entartet Kunst, which translates to degenerate art in English. In 1937, over 5,000 works of art were purged from art collections and museums on the grounds that they were Judeo-Bolshevist, degenerate, or subversive. The pinnacle of this assault against the modern imagination was the Entartet Kunst exhibit that opened in Munich on July 19, 1937. This exhibit, designed to incite revulsion against the imagined degenerate Judeo-Bolshevik influence on German culture, featured 650 confiscated works by 112 artists, only 6 of whom were actually Jewish. Yep, the Nazis, who were in power at this point, were not big fans of Jewish people or communists, so the concept of the Judeo-Bolshevik was just a handy way to blame both for everything they considered bad. The exhibition itself sought to undermine, censor and ridicule anything considered expressionistic, cubist or just non-traditional, and daubed the different parts of the exhibition in derogatory phrases. Stenning describes the eureka moment when inspiration struck him. The symbols of the cosmonauts with their oversized helmets, the hexagram, the orbs, the hoses and wires all appeared in my mind in an instant. So I started to draw and paint without over-designing, without trying to tell a story. I just followed my creative impulses. By taking a looser, more inspired approach, and by using a number of techniques and tools that I had once looked down on, I felt that I was embracing my own degenerate art. Stenning's desire to break out of his own creative prison, along with a desire to highlight fascism's tendency to destroy diversity in all its forms, has led to this bizarre composite of cosmonauts, orbs, cables, ominous shapes, and journal-like expressions of the artist's personal journey. So let's talk about it. Born in Concrete celebrates the EK series by Derek Stenning. It took the demonization of the Judeo-Bolshevik concept, fronted by the Nazis as a figure of all evils, and gave it a character and symbolism that allowed it to fight back, in the name of creativity and freedom. The avatar for this fight back is Stenning's cosmonaut, a character that can be male or female, young or old, but is always front and centre of the series. Put simply by Stenning, the cosmonauts represent freedom and openness. The cosmonauts of Stenning's series have these huge oversized helmets, all adorned with the red symbol of the hexagram, a blend of the Star of David to represent the Judeo part, and the red star of the Soviet Union to represent the Bolshevik part. Thus, the cosmonaut becomes the champion of artists everywhere, embodying everything that the fascist fears: creativity, diversity, and freedom. The cosmonaut appears in many different poses and situations, but always flanked with floating metal orbs that are attached to their spacesuits using a series of cables and tubes, acting sometimes as floating devices, other times as modes of transportation, and sometimes acting as impediments. These orbs usually feature symbols that relate to the artist's mindset at the time of their painting, but can also be used to communicate key information relating to the individual piece of art's title or subject. Stenning admits that the orbs don't really have a functional purpose that he has ever finalised, and they exist primarily as a means for creating interesting compositions and little else. This lends the orbs a sort of mysterious air, an almost alien presence that over time acts as something like an additional character. So we have the cosmonaut, their oversized helmets, the hexagrams and the orbs that make up the majority of the imagery that we will see. However, for this artwork to function as an examination of freedom and openness, there also needs to be the juxtaposition of restraint and censorship. We can, after all, only truly know light by its impact on the dark, and thus, for us to experience the cosmonauts' drive for freedom, diversity and creativity, we must also experience the opposite. Now, this darkness is often quite literal, with heavily contrasted lighting and shade consistently used to create an ominous and dramatic atmosphere, as well as a claustrophobia, which is reinforced by the often closely cropped edges of each picture. Sometimes, however, the antagonistic element of the fascistic censorship takes on a more corporeal form and appears as this jagged, angular, geometric shape emblazoned with the words "Entartete Kunst" that feels reminiscent of the Nostromo from Alien, and which led to me dubbing it the EK vessel. This EK vessel first appears in Destrudo, the second piece in the series, and Stenning explains. It was the first appearance of the geometric, hard-edged forms that represent the ideas of intolerance and discrimination in this work. These forms are the antithesis of the cosmonauts. So we now have our recurring elements, the cosmonaut, the hexagram, the orbs and the EK vessel, and from this humble selection of constituent parts we then experience a number of different moods, formats and situations. We see courage, positivity, despair and wonder, all interspersed with little info dumps from the artist, talking of his mood at the time, the meaning of the titles of the individual pieces, and sometimes little insights into the symbols and framings he has used. What I did find a little challenging was the way that Stenning's analysis of the Entartete Kunst exhibition and the surrounding fascist censorship seems to avoid the wider implications of fascist politics. It feels like a surface level critique of fascism at times, and once we get into the comparisons between Stenning challenging themselves to use a different approach to their artwork and the persecution of artists in Nazi Germany, it can actually start to feel a little bit tone deaf. This was especially evident when using a Nazi military symbol on one of the orbs, or in using references to demons from Aleister Crowley's wizardy religion. Now, I try not to be too hysterical when art utilises the symbology of the taboo, but my initial reaction was one of discomfort, and this video is supposed to be an exploration of the book and my reaction to it. Additionally, the layering of occultism and mysticism also proves a little tricky for me. It just seems a little bit left field to go from real historical fascist oppression to mentioning Aleister Crowley, demons and other Magic with a K references. It is difficult to gauge Stenning's political views beyond fairly liberal statements that condemn intolerance or say things such as they don't prescribe to the idea of Judeo-Bolshevism. But this is a pretty low bar to clear, and there is a distinctly aloof feel to their judgments of freedom beyond their relation to artistic concepts. As someone that interrogates a fair amount of art, there is always the question as to whether it is fair to expect an artist to be politically transparent, or to convey anything more than they need to or want to in their art. So I do want to add that any muddiness around the ideological positioning of Derek Stenning is primarily my issue, and does not affect the quality of the pieces themselves or the intriguing ambiguity of some of its concepts. Not everyone cares about ideology and politics as much as I do. Let's get on to some final ruminations. There is no denying that Born in Concrete has a compelling sense of style, and I very much enjoy any art book where the artist lets you in on their thought process and talks through the choices they have made. Whilst I personally believe that it is best to consume art on your own terms, at least initially, much of what I enjoy about world building and observing other people's creative process is the insight into their mindset, their philosophies and their underlying ideological principles, so in that way this book is superb. Born in Concrete is dark, atmospheric and complex, and is paired with insights and context that allows you to interact with the series on a much deeper level. It does sometimes feel like there is a lack of internal coherence in the artworks, but that is the choice of the artist and is part of a more relaxed and spontaneous process as opposed to a more prepared and considered approach. In fact, in the book, Stenning does mention that they did once attempt to explain the internal logic of the cosmonauts and their relationship with the orbs, but that it quickly became a draining experience with little upside, and I think that is a fair judgment for him to make, given what we know of why Stenning began this project in the first place. If you are an artist, writer or some form of creative, I think there is a lot to be gained from a read of this book, and unlike many of the more popular art books, Born in Concrete is both widely available and often not too expensive. If, however, you are looking for more world building or a fantastical setting from your art books, this probably isn't the one for you. There isn't much to the setting beyond what you can see, and most of the elements exist only in terms of their purpose in the composition and not in terms of their contextual function. A little content warning here too. Derek Stenning is keen on references to occultism and mysticism, and obviously there is significant talk of the Untartete Kunst exhibition and the Nazi censorship of degenerate art. If these are topics you may find uncomfortable, it's okay to skip this one. Maybe try out something more fantastical like Dinotopia by James Gurney or Above the Timberline by Gregory Manchus, both of which I have covered previously and both of which have coherent fantasy settings and consistent logics. Not to mention airships, of course. But if you want an art book that focuses on the importance of the process and that prioritises the integrity of creation over the need to explain it, this might well be worth your time. Thank you for joining me today on this quick look at Derek Stenning's Born in Concrete the EK series. I hope you enjoyed this quicker format and that you've got the information you need to decide whether you would like to acquire the book for yourself or not. Thanks go out to Mrs. InsideLeft for help with the scripting and setup, Adventsong and Robert Gordon for the use of their music, and to the WeCreateTogether group for their support and advice. Until next time folks, take care of each other, be kind, and I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.